Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. Today we are talking about hot button topics, primarily diversity, inclusion, equity. I am joined by a special guest, Tina Varughese. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you, Jane, for having me.
I hope I got your name right.
You
Tina,
nailed it.
you, you pronounce it so that everybody can hear it.
Well, you nailed it. It's Varughese. You nailed it. I don't need to correct you. You got it the
Okay.
first time out.
Oh, hallelujah. Okay, that's great. Tell everybody about your background and your business model, kind of who you speak to today.
So I am a keynote speaker. I tend to speak for larger audiences, but I do corporate training as well. I have been very blessed. I've been speaking in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space well before it ever became sexy, to be honest with you. It has been a
Cool.
passion project, certainly for me. Where my background lies, actually, and how I probably got into the space is I used to manage our immigration office for the province of Alberta. And I really noticed a gap when it came to knowledge between businesses that were hiring, because we have such a culturally diverse population, both in the States and in Canada. So we're
Mhm.
looking at about 1/5 of our population being foreign born, and that is higher in urban centers. So, depending on where you are, in Toronto, it's 39%. In Vancouver, BC, we're looking at 49%.
Mhm.
So, depending on urban centers, that will increase. And, we're also looking at the value. So, someone might be born here, but if they're first, or second generation immigrant that were, had parents that really instilled the cultural values, then, you're also dealing with, yes, someone may have been born in Canada, but they might have, in my case, Indo-Canadian values. And so that's going to come into the diversity at the workplace, because at the workplace we're always looking at lots of different types of diversity, if it be gender diversity or cultural diversity or neurodiversity, whatever it might be. And so that's sort of the space that I got into based on my background. From there, I had a relocation and settlement company working with oil and gas expats coming from all over the world. And again, I noticed how it was really impacting the workplace, both positively and negatively. Lots of challenge, but at the same time, ridiculous amounts of opportunity when it came to profitability. And so I really take it from that business perspective.
Oh,
So it's
that's
not just
great.
the right thing to do, but it's also the more profitable as well. And so that my background, my business background, I have a business degree, poli-sci degree. And so I really wanted to bridge all of that, the education, the experience, and my passion for speaking. I got in trouble all the time, Jane, for talking too much in class, and I just had to monetize that. So kind of got
Yay
into that.
for all of us who got that on our report cards. Jane talks too much was definitely on my report card. So you said that you were born in Canada. Talk a little bit about your own family and cultural values that you hold.
Yeah, my parents came to Canada well over 65 years ago. So they were actually kind of considered pioneers when it came to
Oh,
coming from a foreign country. A lot of immigrants obviously have landed, but definitely they came a long time ago.
mm-hmm.
And they've always kind of believed in, the concept, if you're in the country, you really have to embrace the country. So I almost joke that my mom is more westernized than I am. If you saw her and how she dresses, she could
Really?
fit in New York. Like but at the same
Wow.
time, the cultural values, absolutely, depending on where someone is from, can be different from what we're used to if we're in Canada or the US. So in Canada and the US, we tend to be more individualistic when it comes to our values, meaning we're more about our own goals, achievements, objectives. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But when we look at the more collectivist cultures and our top source immigrant countries that are coming into both Canada and the US right now, which is India, China, Pakistan, the Philippines, Korea, Syria, and Mexico, and I was talking about both Canada and the US, well, they're all collectivist countries in nature. So what that means is they're more family oriented, more community oriented. They look at the team before themselves. They look at harmony before their own individualistic viewpoint. And so, of course, when we have different values that we're coming into the workplace with, well, that's going to cause some challenge if we don't have the competency, if it be cultural competency or diversity competency, to understand how to move forward in the space.
Okay, so much to unpack there. You have brought, when I follow you on social media, you're just helping me become more aware of things that I didn't know. And I uh, completely admit that I've got unconscious bias in my brain, right? Are we all hardwired that way? Like, are there people out there who don't have any unconscious bias?
Now, everybody, including myself, has unconscious bias, and that's the beauty of it. It's unconscious. We're not even aware. We're not born with bias. We're definitely not born with bias. It's shaped over time, and the biases happen with the social media that we expose ourselves to, the news that we watch, the companies that we work for, the friends that we keep, the associations we're a part of, all contribute to the unconscious biases that we have. Having those biases does not make us racist. It doesn't make us discriminatory. It makes us human. But at the end of the day, we can all become better humans. And that's where I feel we can make some impact, because the first key is exactly what you said, Jane, recognizing, you know what, I have these unconscious
Yeah.
biases. A lot of people, when I actually do speak both virtually and in person, I'll throw a poll up there. Do you feel you have unconscious biases against others? Yes, no, I don't know what they are. And I have a slew of people that'll say, no, I don't have unconscious biases, because they truly believe they see people for whom they are. And,
Right.
and of course, we all ultimately want to see people for whom they are. We all say, I don't see color. There's nothing wrong with seeing someone's color. I am a BIPOC woman. I fall into the Black, Indigenous, people of color, but I like to say I'm toasted almond, according to the Benjamin Moore Paint app. That's actually closer to my coloring. So, I promise you're not white. Like, that is not your coloring. So
Which color are you on the Benjamin Moore scale again?
you can put it, there's an app. It's toasted almond. If you want this in your
Toasted
great room,
almond.
yeah, like
Oh,
this is what I'm actually, if we really wanted to drill it down, that's
I love toasted almond. I mean, that I would buy that color just because it sounds so delicious, right?
I
So
like to think I'm delicious, Jane. That would be
you
accurate.
are. You are. Okay. So awareness is really kind of the first step towards starting to be maybe more inclusive. Now, let's come at this from an individual speaker. Perhaps they're a solopreneur, or perhaps they have a team of a number of speakers. I just did a post about making more conscious hires so that you have some diversity even on your team. And we're trying. I will tell you that we're trying. I don't know if we're, succeeding and being good enough, but tell us what the benefit is for people to have a more balanced group of people on their teams.
So I would back it up, Jane. So I think it's awesome you're trying, and I think most companies are trying. What's a great approach to hiring people that are more diverse than potentially you are is actually looking at increasing the talent pool and increasing the diversity of who is applying for the positions that you have, rather than, because there's that very fine line of tokenism. So we don't want to just hire someone because they're Black. We don't want to hire
Yeah.
someone because they're Indigenous. We don't want to hire someone because they have a disability. We don't want to hire someone because they're a woman. We really do want to get the best people in the
Yeah.
positions. But what we want to make sure we're not doing is screening out before we screen in. And that's where the unconscious bias comes into play. And
Okay.
so there are many systemic barriers at the workplace. There's a lot of unconscious bias that we're not even aware of. But when we can tap into the unconscious bias and systemic barriers that may exist, then we will naturally start to increase the talent pool so that we're actually getting more people to apply. Because
Mm.
at the end of the day, we still want to get the best person for the job, regardless of race, religion, color, toasted almond colorness, whatever it might be. We want the best people working in our organizations. It's a matter of how do we attract those people enough to make sure that they want to work for our organizations. So
Okay.
that's sort of a key. It's a bit of it's convoluted because
Mhm.
I know every company out there has the best of intentions. I know that. And I know most people aren't. I would never in a million years say people are racist. I think people for the most part are coming from a place of great intention. They just don't recognize that they may have these unconscious biases or systemic barriers that are stopping people ultimately for applying for positions. So, what I mean by that? Well, think about digital inclusion. Digital inclusion. We have a lot of people in Indigenous northern communities in Canada that don't have access to Wi-Fi yet. How are they supposed to hear about the jobs? So they're
Right.
not applying. So that is a systemic barrier of inclusion to hiring. So now we have to think as companies, well, then how do we get that information out if we really want people
Right.
to really speaking the actions that we really want? How do we get them to even look at applying? Small things. We have to look at our job descriptions. So job descriptions can have, without even us recognizing this, it can have gender um, imbalances. So
Okay.
for example, there are words, competitive, driven. Well, those are more male oriented words, collaborative, communicative. Those are more female oriented words. So what we want to do, even with our job descriptions, let's say you're looking for a new CFO, well, you want to make sure that you're putting the gender neutral or gender balanced terminology in those job descriptions, because there's going to be internal bias that we have within ourselves that will go, I'm not, maybe I don't see myself as competitive and driven. Maybe I don't apply. And so that's why we want that balance in place of those gender words, so that we have balance even within our own just job descriptions. Now, if we're a small company, that's pretty easy to do. But if you're a medium, a large size, you can use artificial intelligence software. Textio is one of them, to look at those job descriptions to decrease the systemic barriers that are existing. So there's lots of different things that people can do to increase that talent pool, to ultimately look at diversity and inclusion within the workplace in a much more effective way.
Do you see, and I see a shift, but I'm hoping you'll see a shift as well in the representation of speakers up on the main stage, reflecting more of who is in the audience. Have you started to see the trend that the people are hiring more diverse for the roles in speaking?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I am definitely seeing more. So with keynote speakers, that's a pretty small percentage. And so I'm taking it from that keynote speaker
Okay.
place. And I tend to, I kind of make a point, and I'm a little edgy on social media because I always want to make it really clear
Yeah.
that I am often the only female, coupled with the fact that I'm the only visible minority on the stage. So
Mm.
yes, I'll be there, but I feel very confident I am not representative of all the women that are probably at these conferences. And so I always kind of make a point. I'm like, I'm going to rep the women well, because I just feel like, well, now all of a sudden I am not representing my talent on that stage. I'm representing all women and
Oh,
visible minorities. So
yeah.
that's a lot of pressure when it
Yeah.
comes to that position. So yes, I'm seeing more
Yes.
diverse people on the stage for sure, but I think we have a long ways
Ways
to
to go.
go, because when we see it, we can be it. So if you think of let's say we're looking at an accounting conference. So in the accounting sector, you're looking at almost a 50% split of both men and women in that occupation. But I promise you, I've almost made it almost every time I'm at an accounting conference, keynoting, that I am the only woman and I'm the only person of color. Yet that is one of the most diverse industries in terms of racial diversity as well as gender diversity there is. So you're getting your experts to motivate and inspire, influence, impact everybody in that conference, yet they're not represented on that stage. What's the messaging there?
Hmm. I can tell you though that it wasn't 50-50 back when I were right out of college. One of my first jobs was working for one of the big five
Wow.
accounting companies
Yeah.
in Canada, and it was all men. And like
Absolutely.
that the makeup that you have see on the
Yep.
stage right now was the makeup of the boardroom and the partners and everything back then. So we're seeing some progress, but
Absolutely.
perhaps we're not seeing it across the board. And so my goal is to just have conversations that continue to take that to the next level. Hopefully there's someone who's listening in today who does the hiring for conferences, and you really, if you're not already asking yourself, is my lineup on the stage reflecting my audience? In then if not, then we need to make a change. So I love that we're just having this conversation.
Yeah, awesome.
So now you mentioned you're a little edgy on social media, and I love that because I think that that's why people are going to hire you, because this is, hey, I'm here kind of in your face telling you what you need to know. And you're not being timid about it. You're not being shy about it. And I love that. Let's talk, though, about when we see things that we think are offensive or potentially racist or something like that. We're not necessarily going to see them in the workplace because we all work typically with our teams, maybe a lot of us virtually. When we see things like that, what are we supposed to do? What's the right answer? What's the proper protocol?
Well, we will actually see this in the workplace too, Jane. It'll come probably under the topic of microaggressions. And
Mm,
so microaggressions is, those unintentional acts of racism, ableism, genderism. It happens all the time. You
mhm,
know, for example, you might be at the workplace, either virtually or in person. Someone's wearing a hijab and their colleague says, "Why do you wear that? It's covering up your beautiful hair and face." So it's almost an unintentional compliment. It's, "You have a beautiful hair and face. Why are you covering it up?" That's a microaggression right there.
okay.
Now, the thing with microaggressions is it's all about intention and impact. Were
Okay.
they trying to be intentionally negative or intentionally discriminatory or intentionally racist? My guess is probably not.
Right.
But the impact that it can have quite a bit of negative impact, particularly depending on who's on the receiving end, and that goes for both parties,
Yes.
because at the end of the day our bias is there because it goes over time. And so we're seeing the world through the lens that we see it through. The
Right.
person talking to us is seeing their world through the lens they're seeing it. So they might have meant nothing by it, but
Mhm.
it can have negative impact. So how do we now move forward in that space? Well, first, I would just say, and this is how I often try to explain it to people is, first of all, not everything you hear is racist. It may it may not have been it might have been the most curious comment,
Yeah.
right? Like people might actually ask something that they meant nothing by. So, there's really nothing wrong with saying, "Do you mind letting me know, what did you mean by that?" Or, just asking for clarity, giving them that place to explain themselves. They may not have meant a darn thing about it. So we're just sort of looking at intention and impact. Now, if there's something that so blatantly, someone, and this happened a lot, I would say, I call it the Corona coaster, with COVID. There
Mm.
was just a lot of racist jokes when it came to, Asian flu, etc. Well, that's more of a racist comment. And, that's when you can just say, "Hey, dude, that's not cool." Or like, really, just because our silence is, when we're silent in those moments, we're agreeing with what's being said. So
Yes.
I think it's so important to say something, if it's, "Dude, that's racist," or "That's not cool,"
Would you
or
take someone aside and say, "Hey, I just want to let you know that this is how I perceived what you said." Like you can do that privately. It doesn't have to be out like
absolutely.
public shaming,
Absolutely.
because
And I
maybe their intention
absolutely.
really wasn't to be racist or whatever it was. I want to stay
Yeah,
on microaggressions for a little bit longer because there's a lot of them that can happen. Can you just give me like some examples? Um, I
absolutely.
I want to talk. I want to ask you. I have heard it said that black women have lots of different types of hair. And going up to a black woman and talking to her, I'm a white woman, just talking to a black woman, and saying, "Oh, I love your hair." Is that a microaggression?
So if you said, I love your hair, I personally wouldn't feel that's a
Hmm.
microaggression.
Hmm.
But but there is a component, and I understand. I actually did a YouTube on this with a beautiful
Okay.
black woman, Joanne Kenya Baker, who explained a little bit of the background when it came to the colonialism of why black women feel they have to wear their hair in the way they do. And
Okay.
so there is a natural way to wear hair if you're black, but due to colonialism, a lot of black women couldn't really embrace how their hair really should be authentically. And so that was sort of some of the issues outlying part of that. And even she explained a bizarre story of how someone in an elevator just started reaching their hand, touching her hair.
Okay. Now that is not okay,
That's
right?
so, it was so weird. And her husband, who's white, had quite a hilarious comment back, because he was like, what is going on? And so I think there's a bit of a fine line. Again, I think we have to ask ourselves, what's the intention? What's the impact? Funny you even asked that question. I was at the gym this morning, and
Yes.
there was a black woman who passed me in the parking lot. She had a very, very short shaved afro, but she had dyed her hair blonde. And I said, I
Okay.
love your hair. It's awesome. And
Yeah.
she, of course, said, thank you so much. Right. So
Yeah.
was that a microaggression? Absolutely not. I'm giving her a
No.
compliment,
Yes.
and she recognized it as such. But
Okay.
there's a bit of a fine line. And I really
All right.
think that, for example, a typical microaggression is, in the workplace, someone is BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and you say, you're so articulate. Well, that would be a microaggression where you're
Oh,
making the
goodness.
assumption that they
Yeah.
wouldn't be articulate,
Right.
that you're making the
Probably saying
assumption.
that to a 7 foot basketball player might be the same thing, right? You're so articulate.
Exactly.
Oh,
You're
because
right.
I'm a seven
And
foot basketball player and I'm black, I'm not supposed to be articulate. Sorry, I just did it right there. I said 7 foot basketball player, but
yeah,
I meant to say black, but
yeah,
it's not assumed that all 7 foot players are black. So there you go. I mean, look at how easy it is to kind
it
of.
is.
But
But
I
Jane,
probably
I
put
don't
my
want
foot in
us.
my mouth a lot of
No,
times.
you didn't, because you know
I'm
what?
learning.
I don't want us to be in a place where, like, first of all, you just called yourself on it.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer of, let's call people into a conversation, not call people out. We don't want to
Right.
shame or blame, because I don't even feel that works
Yeah.
ever.
All
And
right.
I also don't want us to live in a world where we're all walking on eggshells, and that we're all so darn politically correct that we can't be
Yeah.
authentic.
Thank you for
Because
saying
at the
that because I
yeah,
think that the pendulum is really swung. My thought is that okay, let's give the example of not enough inclusion on the main stage. Sometimes what I think happens is the pendulum swings. So you go to conference on year one and it's all middle aged white guys.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry, middle aged white guys. And it's all them. And then now we've become more aware and more inclusive. And so you go and you see the next year and it's all there's like a
yeah,
rainbow of colors and different types of things. Okay.
yeah.
But somewhere in the middle is probably exactly because we still need to hear from our middle-aged white guys.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
so, like, I think the pendulum swings. And I wonder, we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole here that I'm nervous about.
Go.
Um, I wonder about when, you know, is there a point where we've gone so far in political correctness that people are going to get just so tired of trying to keep up?
Yeah, I think we're there. I honestly think we're there. In fact, I explained an example where I even felt so psychologically unsafe during one of my own sessions that I started questioning how authentic I could be when I showed up.
Mm.
when I showed up in the space, because it was getting to the point where I'm like, "Ooh, can I?" Because where I actually make impact, Jane, and why I probably have done very well in this space, because there's a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion speakers. But
Yes.
where I kind of make myself a little more identifiable is I use humor. I actually try to use humor in this space, which is not the norm. And
Okay.
so it was getting to the point, and I even realized, I'm like, whoa, I used that joke 10 years ago. I can't use it anymore. And
Oh.
I had to kind of go, yeah, okay, I really can't use it anymore. And that's okay. But that doesn't mean I can't use humor. So yes, our times have changed, but I really think that it all comes down to psychological safety. So yes, we need diverse, equity, and inclusive environments in both our personal and professional spheres. But
Hmm.
if we don't feel psychologically safe, if we don't feel that we can say what we need to say and show up authentically, be seen, be heard, acknowledged in the way that there is no negative ramification, we don't have psychological safety on that stage. We don't have psychological safety in the workplace. Where I've seen it make the most impact is when leaders truly align with the actions and accountability that they're really trying to like portray. So for example, if a conference organizer only put, someone that looks a little bit more diverse on the stage because they felt it was the right thing to do, but it really didn't align with how they truly felt, their
Hmm.
intentions are not
Misaligned.
um yeah, they're misaligned. And I've even noticed that with myself. I'm at the point where I'm like, if I'm being hired for tokenism, or what we would really call optical allyship, meaning if you're just bringing in a diversity, equity, and inclusion speaker because you're like, oh, this is the hot topic right now, we better do it, we better do the right thing.
Right,
But if
right,
it doesn't really align with the values of that conference or the values of that organization or the values of that company,
right.
yeah, don't be bringing me in, because I am not going to be your token to just say, hey, checkbox, you did it. That's, if you're bringing in a speaker for an hour or bringing in a speaker for 20 minutes on that stage and then you're like, check, done. That's probably not, the actions and the accountability that we really need. And
Yeah.
so so it really has to make sure that those values align with what you're really trying to accomplish. And I have noticed that has been a bit of a gap, that it all comes down to leadership. And do they really, it's not just about doing the right thing, but does it really align with who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, and I would say even for us, the pendulum it probably swang too far. Swang, I don't even know if that's a word. Too far, and there might have been topics on our show that weren't exactly right for the show. But we wanted to just go into it's almost like in an effort to expand, we expand just a little bit slightly over the edge. And so now we're kind of going, okay, let's do a combination of over the year, take a look at our broad spectrum and see, are we having a nice diverse group of people?
Yeah,
But then are we also staying on topic?
totally. And I
I
really,
think
it's not
perhaps we
about
might have slid
diversity.
over. Yeah.
Yeah, diversity for me, it's not about the color of your skin or the religion that you practice. It's really about diversity of perspective. And
Mm,
so I love that you kind of went, wait a second here, let's step back, because at the end of the day, we really just want diversity of perspective when it comes to the speaking
yes.
industry.
Yeah,
And
that
to
was
be
really
able
good.
to get that diversity of perspective, you need a lot of different people that are bringing, like, I am much more than a brown funny woman. I have lots of hats that I wear, and that's the diversity of perspective that I'm going to bring to the table. There will be speakers out there that are going to take it from a completely different focus than I am. And so because people, it's funny because I literally had a client say to me, Tina, I got to tell you, I didn't hire you because you're a woman and that you're brown. I actually watched your videos and you're freaking hilarious. That's why I hired you. Like, it was, so that
Ah,
perspective, that diversity of what you're bringing to the table is very layered. And what we see on the surface, or what I call the iceberg, what you're going to see is not what you're necessarily going to get. We're much more layered than that. What's underneath that iceberg?
you actually check so many boxes for people who are trying to hire diverse because being female and a woman of color, but then also So you check a couple of boxes there, but then also you check the humor box, which is another big box. So I can see now why you've got such huge success here in the speaking industry. Okay. Um, Talk about what things might completely turn off an audience, or at least people, diverse people in an audience. What are some things that might have been okay a few years ago that aren't okay today?
I really think it depends on the speaker. So for example, like I don't swear on the stage. I'll
Okay.
never swear on the stage.
All
And
right.
I know that really can offend so many people in the audience, but Gary V can get away with it, you know. So I think if you're authentically swearing from the stage and it's part of your brand and it's who you are and it's authentic to who you are, swear on the stage. You may offend some of those people in the audience, but if you're going to own it and if it's who you are, then
Yeah.
no problem. I know for myself, I literally just heard a speaker, that I was like, "Ooh, you're making me cringe right now," because the speaker unfortunately had such an arrogance about her from the stage. And she, you know, she would pose a question and there would be crickets and she's like, "Oh, you don't know that one either? You don't know what that one either?" And
Oh,
I'm like,
okay. Swearing from the stage though and offending your audience, those are just things not to do. Just don't do that anytime, anywhere, any
"Yeah,
place. But what would be something that's kind of in the DEI space, or something that might
I'll give
uh,
you one. I'll
something
give
that
you
might,
one.
yeah, okay.
I'll give you one that I actually, you were there. I keynoted for the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers.
Okay.
And I was trying to, because it was our convention, and I was trying to give speakers that exact insight as to what is something you could say from the stage that maybe you could get away with years ago. And it's going to fall not even on deaf ears, but potentially on angry ears right now.
Yeah.
So, and I notice this all the time. Speakers are notorious for doing this. They'll say, "My tribe, my tribe."
Oh,
So, and they say it in a positive way, you know,
yeah.
and I was like, wait a second here. When you have, you know,
Okay.
Africans in the audience, if when you have indigenous in the audience and you're using that language which
That's
they would
cultural.
convey as a
Yeah.
negative,
Yeah.
and you're my tribe, it's not only non-inclusive, it's beyond offensive. And most people now are kind of educating themselves on recognizing that saying my tribe.
Okay. So that's
Now,
cultural appropriation, right? And
cultural
and
appropriation. Now,
and
I will
also,
say
let's
I
say
made
put spirit animal into the same place. I just watched. Do you watch the morning show?
I
And
don't watch the morning show, but I was literally going to give you that example, Jane. So
okay.
someone in the chat, like I had done a gig, and someone in the chat said, "Tina, you're my spirit animal."
Oh,
So I put it on social media. I was so excited. I'm like, I'm someone's spirit animal.
yeah.
And I
Oh,
didn't think anything of it. And it
you
got
got
into
in
this. And
trouble.
that's what I mean by the edgy piece, because I really try to create a psychologically safe space, even in my social media.
Yeah.
I want people to comment. And so I had people like private messaging me what the negative would be there. I had people openly saying, but that was meant as a compliment. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, you know, I think this is a great discussion to have, because I have to say, I was like, oh, I didn't know that one. And I got
Whoopsie
called on it in my
daisy.
own social media feed.
Yeah, well, I wish people would call me out more because I'd really like to know and learn. Like, I really am very open to hearing about my mistakes, and I don't get called out enough, I think. Um, Cultural appropriation, we really need to watch out for that. Um,
A small
another
one. I'll
one.
give you a small
Okay,
one.
give me another one.
Another one. So, you know, for example, you're a speaker, you're on the stage, and you know, people are like, well, how do you address the audience? Hey guys, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, right? Now
Guys,
that would,
hey,
for
guys.
me, hey guys, now if you're identifying as trans or non-binary, you know, or you're a woman and you're like, hey, wait, I'm not one of the guys. But that one is funny because I have to say, if I'm in the audience and someone said, hey guys, would I be offended? Not
Wouldn't
at
either,
all.
but somebody who's non-binary might, right? So,
Might. And I
hmm,
think that one would be more like, because you have a lot of listeners that are more
more
workshop,
benign.
you know,
Mhm.
facilitators, trainers.
Yeah.
That someone, from a stage, from a large stage, I don't know if it's as big a deal, but as a workshop facilitator and as a trainer, and you're trying to create this very inclusive space
Safe
for a smaller
space.
group. Yeah,
Yep.
and you just said, hey guys, or if at the workplace, hey guys, let's go for the meeting.
Yeah.
Would it offend me? Not at all, but it could offend some just by how they're identifying. So
Okay.
it's just those small things. And I'm not saying change who you are, change your vernacular, just be aware of it. Be
Yeah,
aware of it.
and awareness might be uh, saying after you say, "Hey guys, ooh, I just caught myself." I think saying things like that out loud are really interesting. If anybody in here is non-binary, I apologize, or whatever it might be. It makes you just go, "Okay, they're aware." But I think that's a really good one. Anything else for LGBTQ that we might and I don't know if my acronym is even correct at this moment in time
It
because
changes so often.
that's one that I'm having a really hard time keeping up with.
Oh,
And I also wonder if there aren't people who are just, what do you say to people who are like, oh, come on, how many more are we going to find out about? Like, what do you say to people who
so
are worried that it's going to some faraway places?
yeah, so I will literally say this as my own because I don't even use the acronym. I copied what David Shit from Schitt's Creek says, and I'll just say, I'm into the wine, not the label.
Okay, I'm into the wine, not the label. I love that you quoted Schitt's Creek.
Right? I'm like, who cares? LGBTQ, LMNOP. I don't really care. I don't want to have days that we celebrate this anymore. I want to get to a place we don't need these days.
Uh,
So honestly, you do you. I am not into the label. I'm into the wine. So it's like,
that's so
right.
good, that you said that. Okay, I'm gonna just give one last confession here before we leave. Um, oh gosh, now I'm feeling like I'm like kind of outing somebody. Somebody in my life has not declared their sexual preferences or something like that, and I'm learning even more about that identity is one thing and sexual preference is another thing. That is something that I've learned in the last year. But they haven't declared, and so I just asked the question, like, how do you identify or something like that. And in hindsight I realize that's none of my business. Why did I
And
even
does it
ask?
and
Like,
does
why
it
do
even
I care
matter?
what label he or she might have? Like, who cares? I'm into the wine, not the label, is a great phrase and a great kind of mantra to have. If somebody hasn't come out yet and you think they should, it's none of your business. It's
Well, and it's
only
also a
their
great
business.
way, right? It's a great way for you to say, I don't care.
Yeah, but
I
I
don't
didn't.
care.
And that's actually was the intention of the place that I was coming from. Is like, we've all known for years. I don't really understand why you haven't like staken a claim.
Yeah.
But maybe there was something that he or she identified with that I didn't even really understand yet. And really, when the bottom line comes, I shouldn't have asked the question. I felt like maybe that was kind of offensive.
Well, I had a personal experience with this. My best friend, who I've known for well over 25 years, did not come out to me till 6 years ago. And of course, I had
Wow.
some, yeah, he's the godfather of my children and still didn't come out. And when we talked about it openly and honestly, I said, "What's the deal? I'm your bestie. Why would you have not even have told me?" And he goes, "Tina, I knew that if I had told you, you would force me to come out when I wasn't even ready." And I'm like, "No,
Uh,
I wouldn't. I wouldn't do that to you." And then I paused. I'm like, "Yeah,
yeah,
I probably would have
probably
done that." And right,
would.
because I would have wanted
Yeah,
him to be in his authentic self. And he taught
yeah.
me, and I didn't know this. He taught me, like, until you're truly ready
You
for
need to do it
yourself
when
to
you're ready.
authentically come out,
Yeah,
there's no point in
yeah.
telling people, even if they're the closest to you on the
Mm.
planet, because they're just simply not authentically owning that for themselves for whatever those reasons. My bestie was born in a Lutheran household, raised in a, came from small town Saskatchewan in a very corporate industry. He
Yeah,
wasn't ready, and who am I to say, well, you need to be ready? No, it's not.
yeah,
And honestly, I don't really like whatever goes on in the bedroom. That's you do you. I don't
yeah.
care. What are you doing with,
I-
what's, how
I'm
are you
into the
showing up?
wine, not the label. That is a great quote. I'm so
You
glad we
can
got
take it,
there.
you can borrow it, all your listeners can go with it. We're going to go with it.
Tina, thank you so much for helping to just, let us be just that much further in our education. It's just about having a conversation. That's all it is. If people want to get in touch with you, what should they do?
My website is tworksforyou.ca. You can see my cute little logo there at tworksforyou.ca. Company is Tworks. If you ever want to reach out and chat, send me an email, phone. I am
Beautiful.
on every freaking social media platform there
Yes.
possibly is, except TikTok, but I'm so ready. Like I am ready to embrace
That's
TikTok.
funny. Let
So
me
yeah,
spell your
so pretty
last
much
name
all of
for
it.
somebody who might want to reach out to you
Oh,
on.
thank you. It's V as in Victor, Arughese as in Sam E.
Okay,
So
beautiful.
Tina Varughese, I appreciate that,
We connect
Jane.
on LinkedIn, so we're on LinkedIn buddies, and
We
love
are.
following you out there. And
Thank
if you
you.
get on TikTok, I'll be watching you there as well. Thank you so much for being here today. I've totally enjoyed our time, and
That was fun.
if anybody would like to let us know how this episode kind of impacted you, we'd love to hear about it. Thank you so much for listening, and with that, we'll say see you soon, wealthy speakers. Bye for now.